Who are you? Say and spell your name for me.
Sure thing. My name's Gav Blaxberg. It's Gavblaxberg.
And what do you do?
I'm the CEO at Wolf Financial, and Wolf is a financial media brand mostly focused on connecting with retail and companies through Twitter Spaces. So, long story short, I do about 40 hours of Twitter Spaces a week. I'm the main host, and I cover every financial topic and investing topic you could think of, from Web3 to crypto to stocks to real estate.
So you got your finger, you're not just a company selling a product, you got your finger on all the products.
Exactly. So I'm not selling a product myself. I actually work with other companies to help them reach their target consumer.
So I don't want to say you're a podcaster, even though you do that, you're also a consultant as well.
Yeah, so definitely there's a consultant area to it, and it's helping companies kind of work through different pieces, some advice and things like that. But more than just a podcast, it's really a live experience for the audience, right? Where they can come in and they can interact, they can ask us live questions. We do a lot of live trading as well, so we're actually, moving money in the audience and things along those lines. So it's a very interactive experience.
Okay, so all of this kind of started in the eyes of most simpletons, so to speak, as baseball cards. I buy a baseball card, something fucking happens, and suddenly I'm rich. And then it kind of progresses to, hey, as an artist, I don't have to have the middleman. The record company's not in my way. I'm going to be a better artist because I know money's going to come to me and I don't have to worry about how much is getting taken away from me. And then suddenly it's like, wait, this can help small business compete. The Indian tea grower who has 2 acres can write to a tea shop in Seattle, right next door to Starbucks, right? So,
Yeah.
And now I believe, and I hear a lot of people when I say this go, yeah. So I think a lot of people believe this, a better world, a more compassionate society that's not beholden to the negativity that comes from the system.
Certainly it's a work in progress, and I think that that's the end goal. Right now we're in a bit of a consolidation stage where some people have good intentions, like you were discussing there, where they see it as an opportunity to break free from the system, to have better profits for themselves, to support individual artists, and so on and so forth. And then obviously there's a lot of bad characters in the game as well that are looking for the quick profit, looking to bring people in and kind of sell something to them. So I think we're kind of consolidating through a stage where, you have those keywords like utility, community, and all other things that get thrown around. And eventually we're going to hammer home a piece where people can look at it and say like, okay, I understand not only what the mission of this goal is, but also how it's going to make people money, how there's a return on investment, why it's secure and safe. It's going to take time though to get there. So I agree with a lot of what you're saying there as to where people want it to be. I don't think it's there today, but conferences like this and people engaging, interacting is the only way that it's ever going to happen.
Absolutely, and we're far from it. I mean, don't buy the word, but that's where we're headed, right? I'm not even sure we're through the artists being better artists phase, to be honest with you. Okay, so basically, it's the Wild Wild West out there. And you say the people who want the quick cash, you label them as bad. I get it, philosophically, but they're not necessarily bad. They're just using the technology in a way you and I might not. But there are true bad actors out there. And it's a town with no sheriff.
Mm-hmm.
So where are we going to go in this world of, buyer beware is the world we're living in. If you get fucked because you didn't know enough.
For sure. So it's education first, right? And it's bringing people into that space. And just like the advent of the internet, email, all these different pieces, there were a lot of people who in the early days probably ran into a lot of problems and probably got scammed because they just didn't know enough on how to use it. They were clicking all the links that they shouldn't and things like that. And so it's the same thing when it comes to these projects. And that's literally what I spoke about yesterday. I gave a speech on how to conduct due diligence into an NFT project before considering investment. And it's just walking through the process. And I think what people have to look at it is a little bit more like a traditional business and a company, like a stock, and understand, when you have a stock, you have the fundamentals, right? You can go through the actual revenue. What's their plan? What's their shares? You can look at the team and say, like, do these people have successful backgrounds? Does everything they touched actually turn to gold, become profitable, how to return on investment, and so on and so forth. And I think that the sooner people look at an NFT project or Web3 company as a business rather than just something fun or something explorational, the quicker they're going to be able to educate themselves and actually make decisions that are going to be profitable.
But you still don't have a sheriff who cuffs somebody.
Which is, I get what you're saying, but it's also the entire concept of Web3, right? Is that there isn't that sheriff. That's the beauty to it, is that ultimately no one's going to be able to come in and make that final decision, but it puts the onus on the user to be a lot more responsible. And that's why most of the people who are at this conference probably have a story of something being stolen out of their wallet or something from this case. And what did it teach them? It taught them a learner lesson, right? Maybe they had a bunch of money inside of Celsius, and now they realized, oh, I need to get a Ledger hard wallet, and I need to move the money onto there. So yes, more expensive lessons for sure, but the hope is in Web3 is like once you've learned it once and you're doing it the correct way, you're not going to be susceptible to these future hacks or losses of money because you're going to figure out how to do it, and Web3 is going to actually give you the capability to have the final say on that. Because unfortunately, in a lot of these Web2 systems, you ultimately have no say, right, where your data goes, where the other pieces go, if someone hacks you, all those type of things. And even though there's a so-called sheriff in town, oftentimes the little guy ends up getting left out regardless.
Sure, but is there ever going to be, or is it in your opinion a good idea to think that there ought to be some sort of vigilante, some community shunning of certain bad actors that are of a certain size? If you're hiding in the shadows and you're just one-off,
yeah,
versus a company that's like, this is a model.
Well, there are some. So there's companies like Rug Pull Finder and a couple other verification type companies that will go out there, Certic, right, which does audits. And you can actually have a company go and do a deep dive into a project, and they'll actually give it a rating beforehand, and they'll try to give people a little bit of an understanding. So there definitely are groups that are trying to get into that area, and if somebody puts out a couple of projects that end up being rugs, or something like that, they're going to label that person as a bad actor, and they're going to have that front and foremost on their website. But that's not being delegated to one central area. And then I think we're kind of leaning a little bit into regulation and that side of things. And I think regulation ultimately is a good thing. It's a little bit of give and take in this world, just like with most places, where we want trillions of dollars to come in, but we also want to have freedom. And so we're going to meet somewhere in the middle. Not all the money's going to ever come into Web3, and not all the regulations are ever going to be fully slapped on. And it's going to be somewhere in the middle ground where there's enough regulation that money feels comfortable coming in, but not so much to the point where it diminishes the idea of Web3, and not so little to the point where big money's scared to be in there.
Okay, so you're kind of jumping ahead, which is great. So let's expand on this. So at what point does the industry analyze this and say, if we don't do something, it's not going to work in our best interest in terms of creating some sort of ICANN or the board that picks the emojis every year, or this it can't be fully democratic, it has to be more like a republic. But these 12 people who have been in the industry, who are good actors in the industry and have proven themselves, need to make some decisions, and I don't like the word regulation, I'd rather stick with protocols, standardized, accepted behaviors, if you will. At what point does the industry say, that's a better alternative than government and Facebook and Apple saying, oh, here you go?
Yeah, it's really hard to pick those actors and those people, right, to be on that board and give them some type of governing power. I like the idea of the protocols and pieces around that. But yeah, I think what we're kind of getting towards is over time there's going to be a more streamlined process as we also figure out the way that people even interact with Web3, because that's changed so much over the past year. It was, there's a lot of different venues. Of course, there's on Twitter, where all these people are just going back and forth in the comment sections. Then you actually can go into OpenSea, where people are having actual transaction history, data history that they're going through, and other pieces like that. You have all the other, of course, marketplaces that are opening up. There's so many ways that people have actually interacted with buying NFTs and doing research that has changed, of course, because 2 years ago, I'm here on an NFT conference speaking. 2 years ago, I never heard the word NFT. It's such a fast-paced ecosystem, and yes, there's people that have been in it for a decade, but they're far and few in between. And so we're such early days, so explosive here, that I think that those protocols are going to happen almost naturally over time as best practices are decided, as ultimately the flow of money decides where people are headed, and people follow big money into places. So yeah, it's a really interesting concept. Like, could we form some board or something? But at the end of the day, I don't think it's going to be put together by the people. To be quite honest, I don't think people are just ever going to come together and agree on, we want these 12 people to govern us. That's just not going to happen. I do think it's going to be a government body or an SEC or something like that stepping in. And what I would love to happen is for them to work with those community leaders and try to actually integrate with the community and ask, okay, what do you think, could be some helpful suggestions here? Do I see that happening? I don't know. I'm not privy to so many of the ways that the government works in those areas, but that would be lovely if over time that came to be the way that it was, is that this government bodies worked with leaders in the community to create protocols that helped everyone.
What is Web 4?
TBD. That's a good question. I think Web 4, from the way that I hear it, is kind of taking some of the concepts of Web3, but moving them into a more of a virtual reality and more areas like that. It's like kind of, the technology that we're using in this world being moved and being used in a digital world where that's kind of our interactions. But I've heard like 4 different definitions, and the term Web3 is less than a decade old. So I think we might be jumping the gun to get there.